Well, in our last talk, we were talking about in Enlightenment rationality. You have that's a very masculine stance that you would take toward the world,
Right.
And the backlash against that becomes romanticism, which quickly becomes, well, we don't want to embrace rationality and put that in the highest place. So instead, we're going to make it all about pleasures and sensuality and passions. Like the passions are what will rule. Well, if the passions rule, then that's total chaos.
Right.
And chaos would be the traditional way that you would talk about the I will say we'll just apply that to the destructive feminine force. So either you've got this out of control masculine tyrannical rapacious way of approaching the world, or you have this chaotic following of whims and passions and all that. So you get those two things.
Yeah. And inevitably, like David said, when you have a culture where the passion thing runs amok, inevitably
then people demand a tyrant.
A horrible tyranny to clean things up always happens.
A tyrant rises up and takes charge.
Right.
So this is like why communism never works. Is because like communism in theory is like this very feminine way of doing things. You know, this very egalitarian but like shapeless.
Yeah.
Informal.
Yeah, I mean, right.
But like what is always going to happen is a tyrant is going to rise up and just mantle control over it and invert it into absolute tyranny.
Well, and that's why you could say that communism is always only communism for like a split second maybe before it completely reverts and flips into tyranny, complete tyranny, because it can't, it's run amok. It's, whatever. We're not talking about communism here, but.
Yeah, well, this also in you mentioned this in Genesis, but in the Enuma Elish also you have Tiamat, who's identified as chaos, who's this sea monster, or maybe she's just the sea, but she appears to have characteristics, tail and claws and things like a dragon.
Right.
But so she's the chaos monster.
Oh, yeah, she's also the beast from the sea in Revelation.
Yeah, right.
And Leviathan.
Yeah, and when things start going poorly for her, Apsu, who's like her husband, is killed, and her children are engaged in a certain type of destructive chaos, but they're wanting to turn against her. Then what she does is she brings a bunch of monsters into the world, and she puts Kingu in charge and gives him the tablets of destiny, so like he can lay out a perfect order. It's like this very, very similar to this idea here, where you have this this feminine sea dragon who puts a tyrant in charge of things.
Right.
Like from one of these flows the other.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, that's a little bit of a tangent, so we'll try to get back on track. But it is like Antichrist and Anti-Mary. I actually have them in my notes here too. This little box that has the Christ positive masculinity and the Mary positive femininity. And
because what you have ultimately, if you keep on a little further in the book of Revelation, is Anti-Mary shows up. Yeah, and that's the whore of Babylon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to come back to the image of Mary, and in particular the image that you would have in the front of an Orthodox church that's behind the altar, behind where you have your elements sitting, throughout the course of the liturgy. When we went to St. George Orthodox Church the first time, that wasn't the first time I'd been in an Orthodox church, and even the first time I'd been in an Orthodox church, I knew what to expect visually. And so there was nothing surprising to me about walking in there and seeing a gigantic picture of Mary up in the very front of the church. Mm-hmm. Nothing surprising in the sense of I didn't know that would be there. But still there was something I've got to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah.
Because it's gigantic, and you've got these paintings of all these saints all around everywhere, and Mary's 10 times the size of all these other saints.
Yeah.
And when you're sitting there looking forward, then it seems like Mary might be the most important thing here. So again,
Right.
there's like, what's going on?
Yeah, like the only thing that's on the same scale is the image of Christ at the very top of
Yeah,
the
but
dome.
he's like in this dome within a dome where you can't see him from depending on where you're sitting.
Right.
And so he may be, well, actually that's an interesting image in itself. Like he may be bigger, but you can't see him.
Right.
You could speculate on, I mean, that's interesting theologically maybe.
Yeah.
But anyways, there's this question of like, how am I supposed to make sense of this? And it's not exactly that I thought, I mean, I certainly didn't think, oh, well, I see what's going on. They're committing idolatry and they're worshiping Mary and they're telling everybody that they're worshiping Jesus, but they're really not. I wasn't.
Those
Pegasus.
Yeah, right.
They tried to pull on over on us.
Right. So I didn't have that thought about it, but like I say,
swallowed again.
there's there's still like okay, I knew this would be here, and I sort of know what it's all about, but in another way I don't know what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then the second time we all went back there during Holy Week, but not at the same time. But when I was in that church for the second time, and I sat down and I look, and then there's the giant painting of Mary up in the front, and of course it's Mary with Christ. Then it just like, I mean, just had like this moment of epiphany of recognition that, oh, this is not part of the worship, and maybe people will object to the way that I frame this, but this is not part of the worship. This is the church.
Mm-hmm.
And when she's up there in the front, she's an image of what all of us are.
Right.
Mhm. It's like David said earlier, this is how Christ pours himself out into the world, or this is how Christ flows out into the world.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I mean, and it's amazing if you understand that is what the church is. I mean, that's a transformative idea. Like you understand, oh, wait a minute, our mission is to receive God. And when we do that, then we bear Christ into the world. That's what the church is all about.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so often what you'll see like in that icon, like Mary will have her hands spread out, and the infant Christ will be, I guess the best way to describe it is in her.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes in the West it becomes the infant Christ is sitting on her lap.
Yeah.
But I think that's like a later medieval development, if I'm correct. And then like, oftentimes it'll say something like more spacious than the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
So it is like trying to get at, I think I might be misunderstanding, but I think it's trying to get at, like, you got to say she's more spacious than the heaven, or that the church is more spacious than the heavens, because God is in it.
Mhm.
And God cannot be contained by the heavens.
Yeah. And also one of the important symbolisms there with her holding her hands like this.
Right.
Like you see her hands like that, which is a receiving thing. When your hands are like this versus like not like this, but this.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And then your view very quickly shifts from Mary to the Christ child.
Mm-hmm.
Always. I mean, like, and it draws your attention very quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like she's receiving and then giving.
Right.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, when I say that's an image of the church, like the conclusion of that whole thing is the church bears Christ into the world.
Mhm.
Right.
I mean, that's where it all ends. I don't want to cut out that step of receptivity, but it's a very Christ-centric.
Yeah, and I also just like that idea that since the church bears Christ into the world, the church is more spacious than the heavens. It's like the church is like, the church is somehow able to contain that which cannot be contained.
yeah, that's really good.
Which, like, you think about that, you meditate that, you mean that, like, you figure out pretty quickly, like, that means that the church is, like, for one thing, out of this world, but
Mhm.
like also it's like, what thing on earth can hope to stop this?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, it's grander in scope and scale than the Earth itself, but like also than like the entire universe that the Earth exists within.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It-
Like
oh, go ahead.
Well, like I said, when you decide to allow yourself to view it that way, it brings an incredible sense of peace.
Yeah.